And the room naturally quietens down. Fantastic. Thank you, everybody. My name's Rob Page. I'm the founder of Common Press, who organises today's event. Welcome to the first of today's two panels, working with an agent from submission to publication. I'll just introduce our three speakers. We're very happy to and privileged to have Anna Davis, who is MD of Curtis Brown Creative Writing School, which runs courses online and in London, and has seen over 300 of its students become commercially published authors. Anna is an author herself of 5 acclaimed novels, and has been a journalist and Guardian columnist, as well as having worked as a Curtis Brown agent. She taught creative writing at the other place, the University of Manchester, and in many other contexts, our friends at the University of Manchester, and in many other contexts before going on to found Curtis Brown Creative, and we'll hear more about what that is shortly. Natalie Jerome has worked as a publisher and acquiring editor for some of the UK's most prominent publishing houses. You'll hear the words Big Five quite a lot in your career, including Penguin Random House, Pamela Miller and HarperCollins, so 3 of them. In her first 12 months as a literary agent, she was shortlisted as Literary Agent of the Year in the 2021 British Book Awards. She's one of the few black British publishers in the UK. Natalie has worked to improve diversity within the industry. She is former Deputy Chair of Literature Wales and a founding trustee and board member of Creative Access. Creative Access is an amazing organisation that helps place interns and mentorships within the media sector, and Commerce benefited from Creative Access ourselves through one of their brilliant publishing mentorship schemes. In 2016, Natalie was highly commended for her work at the National Business in the Community Race Equality Awards. She also founded Originate Literary Agency in 2023, making it the first literary agency in Wales. A lot of literary agents are obviously based in London, near where the big five are. So it's fantastic when we see literary agents emerging outside of London and the South East. And then finally we have the amazing Tom Benn, who's an award-winning author, screenwriter and associate professor, originally from Stockport. His essays in fiction have appeared in Granta, Paris Review. He won the BFI's I Write scheme for emerging screenwriters, and his first film, Real Gods Require Blood, premiered in competition at Cannes Film Festival and was nominated for Best Short Film at the BFI London Film Festival. He's written 4 novels. His 4th, Oxblood, was longlisted for the Gordon Byrne Prize and the CWA Gold Dagger, and won the Sunday Times Charlotte Aiken Young Writer of the Year award. He also, plugging a common book, he also contributes to the Book of Manchester. There's an amazing story in the Book of Manchester, which I highly recommend. So, thank you all for being here today.
Thank you.
I'm going to start by asking you, Natalie, and Anna, in your former literary agent's capacity, what it is. I'm just going to go back to the basics. We've had a brilliant opening keynote speech about the needs to love the writing and to focus on the love of writing. But I thought we'd start with some sort of practical questions about exactly what agents expect from writers at the first, or what they're looking for when it comes to the first submission. So, Natalie, is it the usual kind of synopsis, first 3 chapters, and cover note? And if so, what are you looking for? I know it's really difficult to say, but what kind of really grabs you in that? What are you looking for?
Thank you. Well, generally, and for me, it's so important, I think, just distinctiveness and clarity of voice. So often the case, I think, people underestimate quite how competitive the publishing industry is. I mean, often, it was sort of we come across as very genial. A lot of us are, university educated, got our degrees and so on, and it can come across as a very gentle, I think, and genial industry. And actually, it's incredibly competitive. So, generally across the board, the industry, it's worth 11 billion pounds of UK industry, and it's, as I say, it's a very, very tough and competitive business. So when it comes to submissions, and what I'm really looking for is people who can cut through all of that and are very, very clear about their audience and about their market. They know who they want to speak to and who their readership is, and I think that is incredibly important. So yes, obviously, you know, a cover note and really thinking very carefully about what you want to say within that to really connect, I think, with an agent, with me certainly. I brought along some books today that kind of really stood out for me in terms of the agency and what I'm particularly looking for. I thought very, very carefully about Originate when I set it up. That again, because the industry is so competitive across the board, whether it's publishing or agents, that, you know, standout and clarity was very, very important to me. And so the ethos of the agency is social change through storytelling, and, you know, through my background as a commercial non-fiction publisher mainly, I've been very fortunate that, you know, there are people who've come along to the agency who come from the worlds of entertainment and business and so on. But we're also really, really keen to platform people from underrepresented backgrounds who are looking at issues across gender, race and class. And as I say, you know, doing that with clarity and precision is really, really important because, as I keep saying, the industry is competitive. So one author who I worked with was the actor David Harewood. What precipitated that, though, and again, I think just being aware of the market and, you know, previous books and readership, was an author who I read, we were just talking about it at university, Tsitsi Dangaranga, whose book, this book was published fairly recently, called Black and Female. However, a book that I read of hers at university was Nervous Conditions, and I loved it. The fact that she was talking about mental health at a time when we didn't really talk about mental health from a race perspective within literature all that much, and certainly from a female perspective, I thought was really, really powerful. So that kind of stayed with me, as did a book by the author Ralph Ellison, who I'm sure most of you know, Invisible Man. This is actually my uncle's copy, he scribbled in it. His name, 1975, February 1975. And again, it's such a powerful and important read. And I felt that you know, again, just from a UK perspective, we hadn't really heard very many stories along those lines. And so when I watched David Harewood's documentary, Psychosis in Me, I thought, that's the person who should be writing a book. And so I wrote to him, and, you know, didn't know him at all, and he wrote back. And so, you know, we got talking about the possibility of a memoir, and we kind of went from there, and that then led to Maybe I Don't Belong Here, which looks at issues of race and mental health. I should also caveat some of this, that my dad worked in psychiatric care and was a mental health nurse for the best part of, I think, 50 years. So again, kind of a personal connection and personal stories that inform your work, I think, again, very, very important. So generally across the board, I'm looking for clarity, strength in voice, and cut through.
Anna.
Okay, well, so I'm not a literary agent anymore, but I was one, and I work in one of the biggest literary agencies. And so very different, obviously, from Natalie's agency, in which she has a specific, strong mission. I would say all of my colleagues have really specific things that they're looking for, but they're all different, you know, and so some of them are looking for instance, very commercial fiction, and, you know, they might be looking for, you know, romantasy, or they might be looking for cozy crime. Others of them might be looking for, you know, strong literary voices. There's a sort of range of agents there. But what you should do, what I would suggest you do, is do your research really carefully so that you are getting your book to the right people. So within Curtis Brown, don't just think about sending it to someone at Curtis Brown, but have a good look at what everybody is looking for. They actually, most of my colleagues change what they have on the website all the time to talk about what they're specifically looking for in the now and whether their list is open or closed, and they will change that. And when a list is closed, these days, it used to just mean I'm a really old, important agent and I'm not taking clients on anymore. But what it might mean now is I know I'm going to be really busy for the next month, but after that I'm going to open my list again. And then I really want to read stuff. So people are very responsive and changing what they're doing. Good agents are. And so when you're ready to submit, and I would say you should only submit when you have got your book as good as you can possibly make it on its own terms, so that it's doing the best you can make it do. So edit it, edit it, edit it. Get trusted readers to read it. We have editorial services at Curtis Brown Creative. We have courses. We're here if you want to explore that. We have courses around pitching as well, but you don't actually need any of that if you can work something really well and if you've got trusted readers that give you solid feedback as well. So get your book as far as you can get it. Don't send it knowing that there are things wrong with it, because then it will just frustrate you if you get rejected, or worse, silence, because that happens too. And it happens because agents are overwhelmed with work, and so they just, lots of them, they don't really, agents, you would think they would understand how difficult it is when you're an author and you're waiting to hear from people, but they don't. They don't really. They're in their own space. They're kind of like, oh my God, there's all this stuff going on and I've got to find something and I need to find this and I need to pitch it to, they're just not really thinking about all the people out there who are sending their stuff in and the fact that they're waiting. So give yourself the best chance in that difficult environment by making it as good as you can make it and getting that opening really sharp. You want a strong but short letter, 3 paragraphs, what my book's about, what I'm about, and why I'm sending it to you, agent. Not dear agent, but make it specific to the person you're sending it to. Make that person feel that you've really looked at what they're doing, that this is a strategic submission, not just a scattergun one. I would say send out to maybe 5 agents at once. I wouldn't go to the whole industry at once, because do you know what, there are a lot of people out there, but get your spreadsheet ready, do your research, think about who your best people are, go to 5 of them, maybe have a spread of whether it's people young in career or more mature in career. You just don't really know who's going to respond better to your stuff. Get it out, so you've got your 1-page synopsis, no more than a page, nice and crisp, a really strong, really focused letter. I know someone's going to ask about comparison titles in a bit, that's fine, we can come to that if we need to, but I'm not obsessed with it personally. And a strong opening to a completed, well-edited, really good book. I'm assuming novels here, but it doesn't have to be novels, there's similar things apply for other genres. 5, I would say 5 agents, but keep it moving. Don't sort of sit there waiting to hear from everybody. Try not to get bitter. If you feel yourself becoming angry and bitter, go and rant somewhere to some friends. Keep it out of your submission letters, because there's nothing worse than a bitter submission letter. A bitter submission letter is possibly the worst of all, and no one wants that author on their list. So, and then just keep that submission moving. If you're not getting answers or you're getting only standard rejections, have another look at your material. Think, am I doing the best I can for my story? Am I articulating it well enough? Is my opening the right opening? Am I starting in the right place? Think about all those things and give it your very best, but be prepared for the idea that this is a long game and that it might end up in the bottom drawer. And one thing I'm going to say quickly before I stop talking is that I've got a former student who contacted me yesterday, 10 years after he studied with us, and I remember him very well, and I thought he was a terrific writer, but I remember sitting with him at the time and saying, I don't think it's this one, but I'm sure you're going to do really well. I think this one isn't working in its current form, but and he got a publishing deal via one of my colleagues with the next novel he wrote, but then some years on, he suddenly realised what to do with that bottom drawer novel that he studied with us for. And he's completely restructured it, but I can see it's the same novel, but it's completely different now, and in a completely different moment. And he's just got the most enormous deals, which I've heard about yesterday. And this is someone who has been writing for years and years, rethinking, refocusing, keeping at it, because he loves it. You know, don't go into it for money. He's got money in the end, but at the end of a very long haul. Don't go into it for money, don't go into it cynically. Go into it because you love it and be prepared to take the knocks and keep going.
Thank you. I've got loads of follow-up questions, but Tom, can you tell us about your journey to finding an agent or working with an agent? How did it come about, and was it an easy process? Was it a long, staggered process with lots of dejection or rejection? How was it for you?
Yeah, thanks. I can talk about that, but maybe before I should preface that I also kind of see the author-agent relationship through a kind of context similar to this. You mentioned that I'm an associate professor, I'm a part-time academic, and I'm the director of UEA's MA Creative Writing Crime Fiction, which is a small specialist course in which the students study with us and produce full-length manuscripts. So every year I'm usually in your position, Rara, and I'm interviewing agents and editors and bringing them to kind of interact with our students. And some of them are from kind of smaller, more niche agencies and publishing houses with specific identitarian and mission statements, a bit like what Natalie was talking about. And some of them are from the kind of the big five commercial, very commercial, slightly more corporate agencies. And they kind of tell our students what they're looking for and that kind of stuff. And because our course is quite successful, it's been running for 10 years now. I think we don't take on that many students. I think the commercial publication hit rate is like 1 in 5. 1 in 5 of our students have been commercially published, and so the industry has taken notice. And so the first year of our course is sponsored by a major literary agency, and so our students submit the first 5,000 words of their novels in progress, and that's marked academically. It's assessed academically, but those manuscripts are also manuscripts in progress are anonymised and submitted to a literary agency, and their team will select the one they think has the most potential, their favourite, they think is the strongest. And what's kind of interesting is what they say what those agents, and more generally say they're looking for is often quite different to what they actually select. So I kind of see the agent-author relationship through those kind of the lens of those tensions and transactions between the Creative Writing Academy, the MA programs, and the publishing industry. And I find that really fascinating and interesting. But yeah, in terms of my own kind of journey to kind of author-agent relationship, like most things, I did it backwards and haphazardly. When I was a student many moons ago on a creative writing course, I was lucky I got a bursary that allowed me to afford to be able to do it. And there was similar kind of talks like this in academia where agents and publishers would come and talk to the students, similar to the ones I run myself now. And there was a publisher there, an editor from Jonathan Cape, and I kind of pitched my project to him, and he said, send me that. And within a couple of weeks, I was very lucky, all my course mates hated me. I had an offer, I had an offer of a deal from this publishing house, but I had no agent. And so I had to kind of do it backwards. I had to kind of do it the opposite way around, and I had to kind of query agents and say, I have this offer from a major publisher, what the hell do I do? Would you like to represent me? And so I was
very unusual direction.
Yeah, as I said, it worked backwards and haphazardly, and I did everything the wrong way. That's not the standard route to publication. And so I asked some advice from my college, from what now my colleagues were then my tutors, and I kind of drew up a short list of agents to query. And one of those was an agent at RCW, which are a literary agency, a very well-renowned kind of London literary agency, and they brokered that deal with that publisher, and I got a 2-book deal that way. And then the agent gave me sold another book to Jonathan Cape, my 3rd novel in a series, and I was with that agent for some time. And then eventually I wanted to kind of branch out into screenwriting, and that agency, that wasn't a priority for that agency, so I shopped around and I got another agent at a different agency. And then I was also working on my 4th novel, which was taking a long time. And that agent, before that book could go out, quit the business. I know it's very common for agents to become publishers, editors, and editors to become agents. There's a lot of kind of swapping and chopping and changing in publishing. But that agent actually quit the business entirely, I think joined an NGO or something like that. So I was and released all their clients. So I was agentless for a while. And then I managed to get another agent who also did the same thing. And so I quickly thought I was cursed, and this manuscript was cursed. So these agents were just kind of taking me on and then quitting the business. But at this point, I was kind of teaching part-time, and I queried an agent that I met who had kind of spoken to my students, and I looked at this agent's website as well, and the agent I'm with now is Isabel Dixon. She's an MD of Blake Friedman, which is another quite prestigious literary agency. And I saw that she was also a poet as well, so she was interested in language. And I was like, okay, that's not always a given with agents. We can get into that. And this agent liked kind of awkward customers. She liked books that were kind of in between genres, that were kind of awkward customers, difficult to position in terms of the marketplace, and had some success. I also looked at her client list, and there were loads of authors and books that were my favourite contemporary novels and novelists and short story writers and poets. And I thought, oh, that would be a dream. And I was very lucky. I sent a kind of short query letter just explaining who I was, and that I had a completed manuscript, and that was between agents. And I sent this at like 3:15 on a Sunday afternoon, and within half an hour I'd had a response. So I was very lucky, and she read the manuscript and said, yeah, this is going to be a nightmare to sell. I love it. I'll take you on. I was also transparent. I queried a bit like Anna's advice. I hadn't kind of blanket emailed every agent in the business. I'd sent a couple of kind of simultaneous queries to 2 or 3. And I was, very honest, and I immediately got back to the others and said, I've had some interest, I've had a bite here from one, just to let you know if you want to read this, and let me know where you stand. And I had another offer from another agent, and another one said, I've read 50 pages of this, I think it's great, but it's not for me. I wouldn't know how to, what's the agent parlance? I wouldn't be able to find the route to market for this. It's usually code for you've got no chance. You've got no chance of this being a Richard Duke bestseller. It's a polite, no thank you. And so that made it easier. And then I met with Isabel, and we got on well, which isn't always a given with agents, because it is a business transaction as well. They're not your friends. They want their commission. It's very much a business, interaction. But I got on well personally with this agent, and then she signed me. That's how it happened. And I've been with Isabel for a few years.
It's very interesting that you came about it the other way around. You accidentally or fortuitously found a publisher, and then they said you need an agent. Which sort of segues into my next question, which is very, very basic, but what is the importance of an agent? What does an agent do other than pitch to publishers? What else do they do? Where do they, and this is the question for you maybe, Natalie, but also what are the parameters of their job description?
I don't think.
Do you want to use that mic? Sorry, I think maybe not working.
Is this working?
No, we'll just pass the one back.
Well, I think there aren't any parameters personally. Well, an agent has a lot of different roles. So I think most people are aware of pitching to publishers, landing a deal, negotiating contract, and the infamous 10%. However, there's a lot more involved in that, particularly I think with literary agency. Obviously, storytelling and telling stories is such an intimate process and such an intimate act between the writer with the reader with the writer. It's an exchange of ideas, and I think it's a really precious art form. And so the role of a literary agent is quite, all-encompassing, really. So I liken it to being a cheerleader. You're a midwife, you're an accountant, you're a lawyer, you're lots of things. But fundamentally, you're an advocate and, as I say, a cheerleader and a support system for the author. And navigating the world of publishing, it's labyrinthian in many respects. And I keep talking about the fact that it's a business. And, you know, we can talk about some of the numbers, and I think we should, because often the case, you know, we talk about stories, we talk about writing, and yes, that obviously is the linchpin and the lifeblood of what we do, but there is also a business aspect to this which impacts the writing and the storytelling. So yes, as I say, you know, navigating the world of publishing and the business side of that is effectively the role of a literary agent. But as I say, there are other aspects to that, and it does tend to bleed into one another. If you find, I think, you know, a good literary agent who's going to be with you for the long haul, one of my biggest bugbears, I think, just making the transition from being an acquiring publisher editor to literary agency, is the number of people who you're working with. And I think that it can be quite challenging in those respects. I see some agents and agencies with vast number of clients and lists, and I'm not quite sure how that is effective and sustainable. So when you're working as an acquiring editor, your list maximum, really, a year, publishing probably about 10 books. And in order to do that, you know, in terms of time, in terms of your energy, in terms of, you know, being very conscious of the market, trying to do a good job for your author, but also for the publisher, that's why the lists are quite so small. So I think there's some conversation to be had around large numbers of clients as an agent and agencies, and it is something to think about when you're querying agencies too, and why you might not get, you know, a response or silence, as Anna mentioned, in terms of overwhelm. So, yeah.
Yes, all of that. I will just add a couple of extra things, I guess, that the agent is, you know, the agent is negotiating the best possible terms for you. The agent is aligned with you in the deal, in that the agent doesn't make money until you make money. If anyone is charging you money as an agent, I mean, we're a creative writing school, so we're under the umbrella that the agency has, but we are separate from the agency, and none of the agents will be asking for upfront money from anybody for reading their work, for example, and nor should they. You are aligned with the agent in the deal. The normal commission rate in the UK is 15%. There are still some agencies on 10. That 10 used to be the commission rate, but it's usually 15 of your earnings for the lifetime of the book while your contract is alive. So your agent is very incentivized to get you the best possible deal. And hopefully what happens is you form a close relationship with your agent who, you know, some people are really close friends with their agents and other people actually quite distant. I mean, much depends on what you want and how that agent operates, because it's very personal. And you hope that that will be a long-lasting, I mean, obviously not always when they leave the industry, but you hope that that will be a long-lasting relationship, that, you know, if your book, that the agent is looking to build your career, and that might involve helping you to develop your work in different directions if something doesn't work in the marketplace, for example. And if you and the agent can't make that work, then that might be the time to go to a different agency. But also rights, that you have, you know, your book has a whole basket of rights attached to it, and you know, the agent may be looking to make you a deal not just with a British publisher, but will be looking to sell translation rights to, you know, as many different languages with as many different international publishers as they can. You could have a whole mass of separate deals for your book if you're fortunate enough to have a book that is felt to be viable in all of those marketplaces. And the agent, in a large agency, there will be specialist agents dealing with translation rights, there'll be specialist agents who deal with film and TV rights, with various different rights to your work. So there could be a whole range of people who are all connected to you and working essentially for you. A smaller agency is likely to have partnerships with other agencies that will do that work. So, you know, an agent working alone may be using a translation rights specialist agency. And so again, they will be connecting you with people who are selling the rights to your work and looking to find as many ways of getting your book in as many different forms into as many different hands as possible and develop your career. That's the optimum. It doesn't always work that way. That's what it's supposed to do.
Thank you. So passing the same question on to you, Tom, or changing it slightly. What have your agents done for you that you were not able to do? And also, sort of second part of the question, what was the editing process like for you in terms of the feedback you had from the agents?
I mean, for the first part of the question, the literary agent has become a kind of integral part of kind of the publishing industry. You know, it's relatively new in terms of authors publish books for centuries without them. You know, the literary agent doesn't really emerge until the kind of late 19th century with AP Watt. There's Thomas Hardy's agent, and eventually, has the rights to Dickens and stuff. And publishing houses hated literary agents at the time. That 10% was standard for a century. That 10% commission. Publishing houses were just like, you've invented a job that didn't need to exist, and now you're parasites and taking money. You're commissioned from authors and haggling better deals. But they're necessary, integral brokers and mediators between you and the marketplace and the publisher. Navigating foreign rights and territories and all of those kind of things are very, very difficult to do without, particularly if you're with a major publisher. It's almost impossible to get past that filtration unit without an agent. They've made themselves absolutely essential. And it is a business partnership, but it's one of those things. I don't even think it's a necessary evil. I think going to the second part of your question, in terms of having that kind of editorial feedback and that market intelligence that an agent will be able to bring to your manuscript and your career more holistically. It's having a champion, as Natalie said, it's having this cheerleader in your corner. Makes it kind of fundamental. There's not really a way to do it. There are kind of marquee name authors who don't have agents, but they're increasingly in the minority and of a certain generation. It really doesn't happen without it, unless you're with a kind of small independent press. You're dealing directly with an editor. If you want to be published by the big five, you need an agent. You definitely do. In terms of kind of editorial feedback, like what can you expect, I suppose is that the question?
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on the agent. Some agents are very light touch and they want a very, very polished manuscript that they can immediately develop a pitch for and kind of got a submission list for potential agents and imprints that they can take it out with. Others are much more hands-on editorially and will want to kind of develop, serve as a kind of early developmental editor with the manuscript with you. And go, but most professional agents will do at least one additional pass with your manuscript before putting on submission. It might be kind of macro edits, it might be structural edits, it might be just fine tuning, and it might be, particularly if you're writing genre fiction or something that's ambiently or ostensibly within a certain trend. If it's gothic, or is this a bit kind of literary horror, or is this young adult fiction? Their feedback has a kind of market eye. They're looking at it in terms of how this might be positioned. Where if you're taking a creative writing course, that might not be the rubrics under which you're being assessed as a good novelist or a good short story writer or a good screenwriter. So it's a different lens of critique that they're offering when they're giving you those kind of manuscript assessments. And that is useful. It's very different, as I said, to what all the kind of metrics for assessing what is a good novel or a great piece of writing. It's very clear-sighted. I try and dispel, to some extent, the kind of romantic notions of the agent author and the kind of agent publishing experience. Though, as I said, it's good to have that kind of great relationship. But like an agent's job is to take your work of literary art and repackage it as a commodity to fit in a marketplace that's constantly in flux and constantly shaped by trends and the zeitgeist. And their job is to both inflate and extract capital from that commodity. They're not custodians of literary art. As you mentioned there, obviously, the majority of them, they're not as, they're more diverse than they used to be, but the majority of them are privately educated, middle class, white people. And that in itself isn't a monolith, but those kind of various intersections, shared intersections of identity, does shape to some extent their values, their tastes, their interests, their preoccupations. And so that will inform who gets past that filtration unit. Having that person in the corner, as I said, is necessary if you want a readership, if you want to sell this, if you want to turn your literary art, your work, your manuscript into a commodity that will be sold and repackaged by your agent and then again by a marketing team in a major publisher. All of that sort of stuff is absolutely essential. You need to kind of go through all those things and decide what you're willing to compromise on and not compromise on as well to reach that market, to reach that desired readership. And that can depend on what kind of agent you get and what kind of publishing house your agent manages to broker a deal with and land your manuscript. So yeah, that was a rambling answer to that question, but rather circuitous.
Can I just add also that input on retail and publishing strategy is also part of the agent's job and a really important one. Infamously, a lot of authors invariably at some point in time will walk into a bookshop and go, my book isn't there, what's going on? And so it's better and easier at times to speak with your literary agent. You can have those conversations with a publisher rather than as an author you having those conversations direct. Other parts of the publishing process, such as cover design. Cover design comes in, and I'm speaking. I've been obviously on both sides of this. I've been the author, obviously the editor sending the cover to the author. I've also been the agent receiving the cover design and navigating those relationships between the two. So a cover design comes in, and the author may not like it. So having someone to have that conversation with, obviously in confidence and with trust, rather than going, hell for leather with the publisher, can be beneficial. So that's also part of the relationship.
Thank you. Once the relationship's established and a book's been placed, it's been taken up by a publisher, what does the agent then expect from the author? What constitutes a perfect author, a perfect client? But do you?
Well, I'm not sure if there is such a thing. If there is such a perfect, I think in an ideal world, and I'm speaking from having been an acquiring editor and also obviously now a literary agent, is an understanding of your market and your reader. Please do think about who you're talking to, because often the case when it comes to submission letters and Anna's point about clarity and concision about what you're saying and then who you're talking to in terms of the number of literary agents and literary agencies, is that often people, in my experience anyway, authors can be a little bit vague, as if they're writing for themselves and not necessarily thinking of the audience and the readership. And it can be something as simple as, going into a bookshop and seeing what's going on and what's current and what's, people are reading and what they're into, and just having a real sense of who your market is. And I can't stress that enough, because that concision then comes all the way through the process, and certainly to the process of querying agents. And as an agent, you do sense that, you can pick up on it in terms of that clarity and understanding of, right, okay, I've got something that I'm really, really passionate about, and I want to say, and this is who I think will read this. And as I say, I can't stress that enough. So I don't think there's anything, there isn't a perfect author as such, but certainly an author who has thought about the readership is incredibly important.
Thank you.
Yeah, totally, all of that. And I think the other thing is just to say, it's a collaboration, it's a collaborative process, it's a relationship. I think that, I've been, and I imagine, well, I'm not sure if you have, because you've had an unusual route in, but I've been an agent's assistant, a lowly agent's assistant, and there is, authors who bully you because they're taking their frustrations out on you, the minion, because they can't maybe get through and get to say what they want to their agent for one reason or another, or they don't dare to. It's really unpleasant. This is a team of people who are collaborating together, so it's kind of like, I think as an author, if you remember that everybody concerned are people and try and take a collaborative view to things, I think that's a bit broad as a thing to say, but I think it's quite important, and there are authors who are brilliant at that, who are great at connecting in a human way and in a strategic way about their work, and who are full of ideas and happy to talk about those ideas and kind of think about what might be fruitful, both in terms of the work and in terms of ideas for how you get the book out there. And there are other authors who are just not very communicative and not very collaborative. So it's something around being collaborative and a little bit strategic, and remembering that everybody in the picture is also a person, I think, sometimes.
Fantastic, thank you. We've got about 10 minutes for questions. So, wow, so many hands. I'm going to start here, but I'll remember you guys.
I'm just wondering how you think things are going to change with the huge rise in indie publishing. Kindle Direct Publishing, for example, are now offering an AI translation for their authors. So your kind of translation editor will be sidelined, presumably. I'm just wondering how you think the issue with the agent side of things will change. And of course, obviously, a lot of people are self-publishing because it's rising, and it's very difficult to get an agent as well. And they're not all rubbish, I'm doing them.
Shall I say a few things and then pass this along? Yeah, I mean, it's like so many other industries, it's an industry in the middle of change and indeed revolution, and and lots of people are not going to have jobs by the end of it, and perhaps they shouldn't have, because I think that we all have to show our worth in the picture of the whole thing. I think, and it's difficult because obviously AI and everything that goes with that is not going to go back in its box, but it's a really important time for us to think how we can get good stuff out of it and stop it from taking all our jobs, the authors included, So yes, I think it is a challenging time. I think translation is an area which is particularly in the eye of the storm of it, actually, at the moment. I think that it's really important still that there are brilliant publishing companies with amazing translators that can do a nuanced and human job that an AI is never going to do. But it's also true probably that what might happen is that AI will translate a book and then a translator may have to work through the AI translation. I think that to look at the most positive view of it, I suppose, would be to say that there are a range of exciting new tools, and we have to work out how to use the tools to help us in our work without actually handing the work over to the AI. But how that's all going to work out in terms of who has a job at the end of it, we're yet to see. And I am one of many authors who is applying for money from the Anthropic legal case, which you might have heard about, because my work has been stolen by AI, and there is a big legal case in the States, and so I'm applying along with maybe you are as well. There's a lot of this going on. It's crazy out there, and many of our governing bodies are not prioritising copyright and the author and artist in the mix of things. So we all have a big job to do. Self-publishing, I'm not worried about. Self-publishing is an exciting thing, and people should be able to publish their work, not not everybody is going to get a commercial publishing deal, but people go out there and make an extraordinary success of their self-publishing and can get themselves direct to market. That's already been happening for quite a long time and will continue to happen. Though I think, incidentally, around this AI thing, the successful self-publishing author has also got a problem there because of all the sea of stuff that's hurling itself around that's just entirely AI. So we're all, in that sense, the self-publishing author is aligned with the rest of us in trying to work out how we continue to show the value of work written by humans.
Sorry, just pick up on that. I personally, I think AI is a tool that we can obviously use to support our writing, but it can never do this. I mean, I've been looking for myself in books, since I think I've been calling this round since I was about 7 or 8, and so AI can't do that. It can't do this, So I'm much more relaxed about it. It can never be you speaking about your books at any point. So as I said, I'm fairly relaxed about the use of it. Obviously, the cases that are going on at the moment in terms of the theft of material, that does need to be addressed. But books that I'm writing that purport to be from humans that are clearly, evidently aren't, I'm less concerned about. I'm old enough to remember, though, a world in which, when it comes to self-publishing, worlds in which Amazon didn't exist, and where we were completely, in terms of the book market, relying on bookshops. And as a commissioning editor, as a relatively young commissioning editor coming into the industry, it was really, really tricky, particularly if you were of colour, to get certain books through, because at that time you were relying on bookshops to make decisions about which books they wanted to take and which books they didn't. And so when Amazon came along, everyone, again, concerned and worried about what was going to happen. And what happened was, and as much as people are conflicted about what has happened in the end with Amazon dominating, but it did democratise the publishing industry to a certain extent. It pushed things forward, and I think self-publishing does do that. I've certainly been an editor and been in a position where I've picked up books that have been self-published and have then acquired them. There have been many instances of other editors doing that incredibly successfully. So I think there's an opportunity there. I think we do still have some issues with regards to diversity and representation right across the business that self-publishing addresses. And if AI can be used as a tool to support writers, then I think that can only be a positive thing. She says very, very tentatively.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm very much the opposite. I mean, I think it's only going to exacerbate inequalities and exacerbate homogenization. Trends-led acquisitions across all major narrative media is algorithmically driven now in terms of what gets through sales and marketing. It's not as much human input, and that's only going to increase.
But who will promote the books?
I think
talk about the books. Who will sit on the
I was thinking
on the chat shows.
Sure. Yeah. I think it's true. I think the paratextual stuff, that what Walter Benjamin used to call the aura, is you require humans to do that. So that stuff will only become more important as you're querying. Because I'm very much with Colin Tobin who said this, and I do think in 5 years AI will be able to write Invisible Man, or something as good as that, because it is an entire proprietary LLM. It's just an attempt to kind of privatize the entire summation of human knowledge and activity for corporate interests. These aren't kind of social good, they're not neutral tools, they're deeply ideological tools. But I do think that to kind of overlap a little bit with what Natalie was saying is that the paratextual element, the stuff that is you, and all those kind of what you brought to that text and what you sacrificed to write that as a human being, rather than using those kind of shortcuts of technology to kind of write that for you, are going to become increasingly appealing. Capitalism's always known that, right? Like that's things are advertised. That's why we have influencers. because we want, it's not just the thing we're attracted to, it's the people who are around that thing, what they're selling us. But I think, to look at it less cynically, I think that human element will become increasingly important, and maybe human written novels will become an increasingly artisan commodity as well, and it might become very valuable in a different way in terms of its kind of cultural capital, because you can absolutely, you can saturate the Kindle Unlimited market with pretty good generic cozy crime novels. You can put tens of thousands of them up a day, and completely drown out, completely smother the human written ones. I think Amazon have slightly changed their algorithm to make that harder to do. It's still, it's still going to get harder and harder to kind of find you in a sea of just a cacophony of AI-generated material. That's only going to get tougher. So, in order to not end on a doomer, I think you and what you bring to the material, and all the kind of stuff that why readers need to read this, and why you've written this book now, and who it's for, all of that stuff is just going to become increasingly important to kind of cut through the AI-generated noise, the slop, the glut of stuff that's going to be out there.
I couldn't agree more. I'm still at the library, picking up my Sylvia Plath. So it's very difficult. It's very difficult for AI to replicate this in any way.
Yeah, let's hope. So I think we've gone slightly over. There's maybe time for one more question. At the back with the black top. Sorry. Yeah.
For me? Right, okay. A much more prosaic question, but what would the panel, or what would your advice be in relation to a live pitch? Is it the same as a query? And in particular, how much of the story would you tell, given that a lot of us today are going to be pitching this afternoon, and for those of us that haven't done it before, your advice would be welcome, because there's some contradictory advice out there. So.
Good luck.
A bit more than that.
Well, I will slightly preface this just by saying I do slightly want to wave the flag of Curtis Brown Creative, which is the creative writing school that I founded. And one of the things that we try to do is to demystify the publishing industry and to empower people and to train people around pitching. So if you find yourself struggling today, have a little look at our courses, because we've got some. But again, I would say I don't know quite what the format is of your pitch today, but in a general sense, be concise. It's again about the clarity and the concision. In a general sense, if I'm asked to pitch something, I'm only going to really try and say a very few sentences. I'm not going to try and give the arc of my plot. If you start by saying a little nugget about what's at the heart of your book, or what is its central concept, what is important to you about it, something very, very basic about its setup, along with its genre. Or if you do have one of those kind of thing where you talk, no one's asked about comparison titles as yet, but if you do have a kind of something that puts a comparison in there, which is perhaps comparing it to maybe two recent things, so like probably published in the last year or so type books, or you can think also about successful TV or whatever. It doesn't have to be from the world of books. I don't think you need comparison titles, but they can help you to convey something very concisely about the territory into which you're writing. So it's about saying the thing that's important to you, the genre, the area that you're working into, potentially comparison titles, getting it across concisely, not reading. Don't pick up a thing and read it. Instead, communicate, talk. And if you say a short thing, then they'll ask you more questions. I think what you don't want to do is go on a great big thing where you start with what your book is about, and before you know it, you're telling your entire synopsis in massive detail. Because in a situation like you're in today, quite probably by the time you finish, you'll have run out of time, and you won't have actually got anything from the agent in response to it. So, make it a conversation. Start with something concise, something that might be a little bit eye-catching. Questions can be good. If your novel asks a key question, that can be something to convey in your pitch. There's lots of different approaches to it, but that thing around clarity and concision, and the fact that it is a conversation. So give them some space to ask you stuff, is my other thing.
Great advice.
Yeah.
All of that.
Yeah, all of that. On the acquisition side, and again, I'm speaking from having been an editor, the publishing meeting is incredibly ferocious. So you, as an editor, maybe sat in a meeting with 5 or 6 other editors across various different areas of the business. And you're sat with a salesperson, marketing, publicity, your MD, etc. And you're pitching your book, new title, to that meeting, and everyone in that meeting pretty much has to agree that this is a really good idea, figure out how many copies they're going to sell, and then from that basis, do a profit and loss sheet and work out how much to offer for the book. In that situation, you have a few minutes. So what we used to call the elevator pitch is incredibly important. So that's basically summing up your book in a sentence. And that's why when we talk about the query letter and submission to agents, that process is just the beginning of, we describe as a long process all the way through to an acquisitions meeting, to the retailers, and so on. And so it's almost like a relay race where you've got a baton of information that you're handing from one person to the next. So the elevator pitch, being able to sum up your book in a sentence also, is really, really, really critical. So when you're pitching today, think about that as part of it.
Not at all scary.
I know.
But everyone you'll meet this afternoon is human and is interested. So,
yes, and wants to help and support, which is part of it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, I have very little to add to that, but I think concision is really important. I think when in doubt, go for themes rather than plot, rather than just kind of, just kind of explicating at length what happened, and then. Talk about those themes, those questions, those kind of moral dilemmas or imperatives that are in the text. And I think comps are kind of an industry standard, but in a kind of more artistic way, if we're kind of thinking about those kind of coordinates and what your text is in conversation with. And those conversations can be kind of tacit or explicit, and they often run on themes, or your relationship with that author and when you read them, or what that author went through to create that manuscript, and that itself can come out. I think you have to be an evangelist for your own work, and that passion can cut through as well. But yeah, it's the elevator pitch is kind of what agents are looking for. It's like, how can this be distilled as an idea, and then it's kind of leveraging its commercial potential, rather than on dazzling prose craft or voice. I think agents often talk about it, maybe like a kind of a strong narrative voice, but sometimes when they're confronted with one, they're like, oh, this is kind of a bit polarizing, people might love or hate it. And in a business, where, that kind of incentivizes conservatism, they want something that kind of reminds them of the last thing that made them a lot of money in the last quarter. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, is it a bit like that? But it kind of innovates within a conservative rubric. That's what they want. And that can usually be kind of telegraphed through the themes, those moral dilemmas, moral imperatives, rather than and then pitch.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
Brilliant. Thank you. We've sadly run out of time, so please join me in thanking Anna.